A reminder that there is a map analysis of the following disappearance on Unfound's YouTube channel. James Bernard Liedtka was a 28-year-old from Menomonie, Wisconsin. He was an engineering student and a military veteran. In the early morning of November 4th, 2018, James was presumably walking from downtown Eau Claire to a home he owned nearby. He never arrived. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Dunsel, and this is Unfound. There are consequences for not understanding why things happen. At the beginning of human existence, communities sacrificed virgins so crops would grow well the next spring. Due to Native Americans not understanding the movements of the sun, moon, and earth, Europeans arriving in the New World were able to portray themselves as gods by predicting the lunar eclipse of 1504. And within the last 15 years, too many intelligent people were suckered into a disappearance hoax that made a few people famous and wealthy, but left those cases still unresolved here in 2024. All because there was not, and still is probably not among the public, a basic understanding of why people go missing under certain conditions. In fact, some of Unfound's own missing people at the time were considered to be victims of this roving, shadowy band of attackers, although there were no facts to support such claims. Brian Schaefer, Jesse Ross, Joshua Guimond, to name just a few. Keep in mind, I'm not saying foul play didn't occur. I'm just saying there's no proof despite too many people's overt, fanatical insistence to the contrary. Well, with James Liedtka, you've heard the intro already. You know where this is going. And really, no matter what scenario, there are no smiling faces. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. James Liedtka was pretty much the son anyone would want. He was into sports, specifically football and wrestling. He was close to and protective of his older sister, Kristen. James proudly served in the military, and he wasn't one of these in the rear with the gear guys. He was in Afghanistan where everything was dangerous. James was smart. Not just in school, but at 28, he already owned a house and an apartment. However, James did have one weakness: alcohol. He had at least one DUI, and this caused him to have a breathalyzer device on his vehicle so that he could drive it. So, on November 3rd, 2018, Mai, her name spelled M-A-I, the roommate of James's sister, invited him to attend a birthday party that started on a party bus. This trip took the group from Chippewa Falls to Eau Claire, where the attendees separated. James took a liking to a woman in the group, Sarah, and they hung out together. Eventually, after midnight, James decided he would not take the party bus back to Chippewa Falls. Instead, he went to another bar by himself, with the belief that James would eventually walk to his house, which was conveniently located within walking distance in Eau Claire. He was never seen again. Strangely, a video showed him walking in the correct direction of his home, while James's phone pinged in the opposite direction. This has never been resolved. Most people are alcohol drinkers, and most people like to go out and have a good time. Contemplate, then, why so many people were prone to jump to a vast national conspiracy 15 years ago regarding disappearances like James's, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, why did James's phone ping in the opposite direction of the way he last appeared to be walking? Number 2, why did mine never live in the house again with Kristen after all this happened? And number 3, how many of you remember that Brian Schaefer's apartment also had items stolen from it after he went missing under similar circumstances? Like most families who deal with situations such as James's, the Liedtkas can't help but think foul play could be involved. The guest for this episode is James's aunt, Valerie Tully. Unfound news. We are getting close to the end of the month, so be looking for the next Unfound Now, where I will analyze a recent unsolved disappearance. No, I have not picked one out yet. Next, for all Patreon and YouTube supporters, be looking for the next episode of Found. For everyone else, this is where I go from disappearance to discovery of a well-known or unique missing persons case that got solved. Finally, everyone please be safe on this 3-day weekend here in the United States. Keep your heads on swivels and watch each other's backs as well. Do not go missing. As I stated at the beginning, there is a map video for James's disappearance that is now available on Unfound's YouTube channel. You may want to reference it while listening to the interview. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the aunt of James Liedtka, Valerie Tully. Valerie, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you, Edward. I appreciate you.
And happy to be interviewing you today. Everybody should know we're doing this interview on May 17th of 2024. Valerie, let's start here. Let's just talk about, of course, you're James's aunt. Just talk a little bit about the Liedtka Tully family. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about, does James have any siblings? And, what can you say about that, being that you are part of the family? What can you say?
James has a sister, Kristen. James is my brother's son.
Okay.
We didn't live close to each other. He's a lot of their lives, but we did come together for family get-togethers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of interaction did you, how often would you say, maybe back in the day, maybe before, we're going to get into his military service, etc., but maybe earlier than that, have a lot of interactions with James? Maybe what some of the memories that you have of being around him, maybe a family reunion or something like that?
Yeah, we would have holidays, that sort of thing at my parents' house. Mm-hmm. James was always interesting. He always had a lot to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not the quietest guy you'd meet. He always knew a lot about everything you wanted to talk about. Very athletic, very self-assured. Even as a little kid, he was a lot of fun. Make you laugh, kind of stuff.
Maybe I should ask you this, being that he is your brother's son, James and your brother share a lot of the same qualities, maybe opposite. What would you say?
I would say they would be very similar. James liked football and wrestling and that sort of thing, as did my brother. They were both in the service. They both went to Afghanistan together.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. Dissimilar and maybe some not so good attributes.
We all have them.
Right. James had his issues and just things that my brother never really experienced or went through.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And James, part Asian.
Yes.
His mother is Asian, or is he a quarter, half? What?
He's half. His mother is from Korea.
Wow. Okay.
James's parents met when my brother was in the service. So he met Mira in Korea, and they got married there. And so his wife came back to the States while Jim was still deployed. I'm not sure where he was at that time, but she had come back and stayed with the family while Jim was still deployed. So.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of speaks to me a little bit. I think I even told you this in a prior conversation, Valerie, that my father, although he's 87 now, in great health both mentally and physically, but he served in Korea as well for 2 years in the late 50s. So, a little bit of a little bit of a coincidence between your brother serving over there, being over there, and then my dad being over there. All right, so a lot of the same qualities with his father. He's half Asian. And so let's move on to this. You kind of already talked about this, but you said that James a bit of a talker.
Yes. He's a talker, a bragger.
Okay.
Very much so.
Okay.
He used to call himself the Asian persuasion. He took those, he took that very seriously, being from Korea, and, he really wanted people to know that he felt that was an attribute.
Yeah.
More so than it was a detriment to him. So.
Yeah. Was he into that? Was he into, of course, he is an American citizen, but did he take an interest in Korean culture, to go over there, anything like that? Kind of look back his background, like, of course, he has a mother's side of his family, his grandparents, that type of thing.
I believe they've had relatives come here.
Oh.
I'm not positive if they went there. I know that when my brother was in the service, they were in Germany, for sure. I'm not entirely sure where else.
Okay.
But yeah, they have connections with their family over there, and I know that his mother still talks to family members of her over there pretty regularly. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so he's takes an interest in his other part of his heritage from, I guess we would say, South Korea here.
Right.
Okay, interesting. That's really neat. Okay, and you said he was into sports. Did you say wrestling and football? So he liked, I guess, what we might call the more physical sports.
Yeah. Wisconsin is big on wrestling and football.
Yeah,
when you're
true.
In
That's
high
true.
School. And in a small town like James grew up in, those are the two big outlets for the boys in that area. And James took it pretty seriously. He really liked to do that sort of thing, and he did it when he was in high school. He also, I don't know, there's some videos of him on Facebook where he's doing backflips.
Wow.
And things like that. So physically, he has definitely got some attributes. He took care of himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We're maybe kind of going to go a little bit backwards on this because he went to the military, but I want to talk about his education. He was in high school, but at the time his disappearance, he was actually going to school, correct?
That's correct. He was going to school at UW Stout, Menomonie, Wisconsin, and he was in an engineering program there.
Okay. So he must have had some brains too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Engineering is tough. We'll come back to that a little bit later, maybe about his college life. But we just want to note he was in high school, but then decided to go get his 4-year degree, but not until his late 20s.
Right.
Okay.
He went to the Army.
Yeah.
So, like I said, his dad was a lifetime in the Army. He's retired now. 20 years, I guess, 25 years. And James saw something in that he liked, and so that's when he entered into the military himself.
Okay. So, I want to get into the after effects of him serving here in a bit. But what about women in his life? I realize you were his aunt, so you didn't raise him or anything. So maybe this is a little more of a nebulous topic. But James and relationships, any noteworthy that come to mind as we're doing this interview today?
No, not really. I know there are girls, and, he did the usual prom and whatnot, homecoming or sort of thing, but nothing serious that I'm aware of. I mean, he did have a lot of friends, but I don't think that there is more of a group kind of relationships as opposed to like really serious kind of one-on-one.
Okay. And we have to remember he was 28 at the time of his disappearance. Of course, more and more young people are waiting longer and longer. If they ever do get into relationships, are usually waiting into their 30s. So this isn't necessarily unusual.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. And what about his living situation at the time? I understand that he did own a house there, or maybe had 2 different places that he was living. What was his home ownership or living situation at the time of his disappearance?
He owned a home in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And then he also had an apartment that he was renting while he was in school at Scout. That was kind of, instead of driving back and forth all week long, he would stay up there, for his studies, and then come back on the weekend, sometimes not. But that was what he had going on at that time.
It's pretty impressive for a 28-year-old to own a house and then also have an apartment that he was renting out. I mean, that's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, if he was sitting next to me, he would say, how sophisticated he is. But
okay.
Yeah, he was getting things done.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is he was taking his life. Me, I've never owned a house, and I'm 53. I've never owned a piece of property or anything. So he was already thinking about life in those terms, and he must have been doing fairly well for himself.
I believe so, and also with his sister Kristen and him, very close. And Kristen was in Eau Claire, and James was in Eau Claire. They both moved there after high school, and they had their trials and tribulations with roommates and apartments and that sort of thing. And so that kind of, I believe, pushed them into finding a home, so they both had some place where they didn't have to deal with anything they didn't want to have to deal with, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's a beautiful property.
Okay. Yeah. All right, very good. We'll come back to Kristen and he, the two of them living together here in a little bit when we get into this roommate who becomes a major part of this disappearance. Let's move on to this. We already have talked about his military service. Do you know at least how long he served? Any idea? Guess.
I'm going to guess just the 4 years.
4 years? Okay. And would you say a positive experience, what you learned about it, what you know about it, and was it a positive experience, and how would you say he handled getting out of the military? Did he handle getting back to civilian life in a good way? What do you think?
Handling the military, I think that everybody I know that's been in the service has gone through, some ups and downs with that. So I think he had, initial struggles, getting used to that.
Yeah.
But I think that he pretty much finished strong. And when he came back, I was told, that he went through some counseling and therapies to make sure that he was where he needed to be, mentally, and wasn't going to carry around with him, some of the things that we know happen to soldiers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that there's a, proactive role there in taking care of himself mentally, and I think that's commendable.
Okay, so he was doing that. If you can say, while he was in the military overseas, did he see any action? Did he have to dodge any bullets or anything like that? Do you know?
I was told there was some action. I know my brother was there as well. I don't think that it was as intense as maybe some other people's experiences are. But there were some instances, that you do fear for your life, and that there are situations that test you.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, very good. And you did say he was in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We all know about that. Okay. Let's move on to this. We do have to, talk about this, being that he was out that night. We're going to get into this party and everything. Did he have possibly a problem with alcohol? Your opinion. You knew. I did not know James. I do not know James. You do know James. What can you say about this?
I can say that I know that he has some, he had gotten some tickets. He had some issues with DUIs in Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is one of the drinking states in the USA, if you look at the numbers. And so I think it's part of the culture. Yeah. But yeah, he did have some problems. He did get, I'm not even too sure exactly how many DUIs he did get, but he did have some, and I know that had curved way down. His drinking had curved way down from where he had been at, a couple of years prior, from what I understand. I never saw him drink. I never saw him drunk. So that's not something that I can say I experienced. But I do know, that there were some issues there.
Okay. Did you know about these issues as his aunt before he went missing? Or did this something you didn't find out until after?
I didn't find out until after. My brother had called me up and said, "Hey, Val, can you go up to Eau Claire and move James's truck? Because nobody up there knows how to drive a stick." And I said, okay. I said, no problem. I'll go up there. So me and my son and my significant other went up. I hopped in the truck, and there was an intoxilock on the truck. So
I gotcha.
That was like my first. I was like, oh, okay. So that was my first indication, and then of course I found out more from there.
Okay, very good. All right, so that was your first indication. Of course, you've maybe found out some other things since, but that was your first indicator, and of course that would be as good an indicator. That's not just somebody talking about James having a drinking problem. It was actually to the point there was a mechanical device on his vehicle. I mean, okay. All right, very good. But your belief, though, is that at least 2017 into 2018, your idea that his drinking had slowed down.
Right, that's the way that I understood it. I know that he had that intoxilock, and he had gotten another one, I think, I'm not sure how long before he went missing. But I know the family was really supportive, his parents, his sister, about him, working through those issues. So,
okay. Once again, being that you didn't find out about it until after he went missing, just to maybe understand this a little bit more, and once again, if this is something you can't answer, you don't have to answer it, but has anybody since then conveyed to you, what might have brought this on in James? Could it have been, for example, his military service or something else? Anybody offer up any opinions as to why he got into this?
Got into the drinking,
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah, because that it became a problem that he had gotten a DUI and had this on his. Any insight into that? Of course, it wouldn't be, I guess, a professional opinion, but just the people who knew him best.
I would say I've talked to enough of his friends, and I stayed there with Christian for some time.
Yeah.
And I learned, that he liked to drink. Like I said, I think it's built into the culture in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of pressure on kids these days too to excel, and I think that those kind of things would, is going to lead everybody to. Most people, not everybody, but a lot of people, to experiment with alcohol. I think James was in the process of, learning his lessons on where that was taking him. And part of the reason I say that I think that, that I was told, that he had curbed that drinking quite a bit was especially because of the night that he did go missing. And I know that even though he had some problems, that there were people that indicated to me that night that he wasn't like overly drinking. He wasn't taking all the shots. He wasn't doing that. And to me, that's a pretty clear indicator that he was becoming, becoming more aware of the detriment that can put in your life and the difficulties that it's going to bring with it. So,
right. And we also, we'll get into this, we also have to remember that, he was going to this party, but he didn't drive either. He went on this bus with all these people we'll get into. So, once again, we know somehow, we have alcoholics, they insist on driving no matter what, even though they know they're going to drink. But James did not drive that night. So that might have been another level of maturity that he was showing.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to this. Just in general, what you've been able to learn about the year of 2018 and what was going on in James's life. Would you say a lot of positive things were going on that year? Of course, we know we've already talked about he's going to school. He owns a house. He has this apartment. We're going to get into a little bit of him living with his sister. But overall, how was everybody thinking about James's life in 2018?
I think that we all thought that he was doing really good, and that he was more focused on the path he wanted to take, and he was, reaching goals to get there. He was doing, really well that year in regards to, moving on with his life from working in the military or being in the military, setting out a plot line, if you will, about what he wanted to do and how he was going to accomplish that. So I think he was in a good place.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to this. We just want to talk about a few people just in general for now. We'll get into the specifics of them a little bit later. But just in general, let's... James was living with his sister, Kristen. Do you know how long that they had been living together? I guess you'd said they maybe did this because they were having problems finding good roommates. Is Kristen maybe his older sister, younger sister? What can you say about their living situation?
Kristen is his older sister.
Now, was she going to school too, or did she have a job that she was working in the Eau Claire area?
She was working. She did go to school for early childhood, I believe.
Okay.
And she had some jobs doing that. She was working at a factory when James went missing, I believe. So she had started something new, as opposed to the child care.
Okay.
So.
And the best as you can tell, this living situation with him was going to continue. They were going to continue, of course, he doesn't go missing. This living situation was going to continue for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's move on to this. Let's talk about Mai, and her name is Mai. And at this point, for the listeners, we know her last name. We're not going to get into that right at this point, because it very well may be that maybe that's not totally her full name. I'm not saying necessarily that she's hiding her real name or anything, but there are multiple women with this name, and so we're kind of hedging on that right now. But we're just going to call her by her first name, Mai, M-A-I. And in general, Valerie, who is she?
Mai is a friend of a friend that James was trying to help out and allowed to move in to one of the rooms in his house as a roommate. And she is the reason that he was out the night that he went missing.
Okay, and we're going to get to that. So, and as best as you can tell, once again, you have your own life to live. I know you didn't follow the daily proceedings of James's or even Kristen's life, but as best as you can tell, how long had Mai lived as a roommate there before James went missing? Your best guess.
A few months, less than a year.
Less than a year.
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mai was a friend of a friend, so a friend of James's or a friend of Kristen's?
A friend of James's.
Okay.
From what I understood, yes.
Okay, so they're looking, even though they're living together, and this is going to be in the house or the apartment that she was living. Where was Mai living?
This is in the house.
In the house. Okay. So they wanted to get somebody in there, maybe cover the mortgage, part of the mortgage or something, and she pops up and she moves in, and she moved in, as best as we can tell, for less than a year. She was there before James went missing. Overall, what is your understanding about her living there? Was this we'll just keep this very simple, was it something that worked out between Mai, Kristen, and James, her moving in there, or would you say, on the other hand, that there were stories about maybe her not being the best roommate?
There were definitely stories about her not being the best roommate. I know there were issues on covering the rent.
Mm-hmm.
Also, maybe, I don't know how to put this without sounding, maybe sketch characters coming into the house.
All right. Anybody who's ever had a roommate, they don't know very well, knows all about that. So she's having people come over that James and Kristen kind of were leery of.
Right, and I know that there was also a story that there was some marijuana smoking. James wasn't cool with that. Kristen wasn't cool with that. So there were issues going along the way, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to certainly come back to her. Now let's move on to a young woman. Her name is Sarah, who actually eventually is going to be a source of a lot of what we understand about that night, what you've learned about that night. But in general, who is she? How did she become to be a part of the story that night? Who is she? How did James or Kristen, anybody know her?
She was a part of the party bus that night.
Mm-hmm.
She was a friend of the girls whose birthday it was.
Okay.
So, that's how she came into the picture, and she spent most of that night from the party bus, kind of paired up with James from as she explained it to me.
Okay. So to be clear, James and Sarah did not know each other before that night.
Correct.
Okay, very good. We'll come back to her. All right, so we have this situation. We've kind of talked this all out, a little bit about James, a little bit about the living situation, what was going on. We recognize that James did have a drinking issue at least one time. Maybe, hopefully, it was getting better there in 2018. And that was what was going on with his life. He seemed to be doing very well in school. And I should ask maybe this, while he was going to school, was he working anywhere?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. So just going to school, living there, and maybe, of course, he has his money that you know, they have the GI Bill or whatever, maybe paying for his education.
Right, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not.
Go ahead.
But when he came back, he also joined the National Guards.
Oh, okay.
Wisconsin National Guard. So that was something
Excellent.
that he had been doing. I know that he stopped doing that sometime before he went missing, but that was something else that he was also doing.
Okay. Involved in. Right. And they take, of course, I've never been in the military, but maybe one weekend a month, I think they all go out and train or something like that. Maybe it varies.
Yeah.
So, okay. So he's involved in that as well, but no full-time job, not even like a part-time job like delivering pizzas or something.
I think he worked at the same place that his sister worked for a time.
Okay.
I'm not sure when that stopped or what that whole situation was, but I know there was a time there that they were both working at the same place together.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Just a few questions before we will set this up, this disappearance, the setup. Has anybody since his disappearance ever say that James said anything disconcerting about his life, his future, anything like that? Anything that might be connected to depression, suicide, maybe a mental health issue like bipolar disorders? Has any of that ever come up factually in the past almost 6 years?
No.
Okay.
No.
In addition, did James ever mention having any problems with anybody? Of course, we mentioned we're going to get back to Mai here in a bit, but if she was having some people over, maybe guys, James ever has talk about any problems with any people, that he had a run-in with somebody, had an argument with somebody, you know, somebody came over to the house or anything like that? Any beefs, I guess what we call them now, any beefs with anybody?
No, this was well talked about in the family, and there was nothing that anybody had any idea that anything like that was going on. So no.
All right, very good. All right, let's now set this up. You've already kind of mentioned it. You said there was this birthday party, and to be clear, this was a birthday party for a young woman who James did not know.
Right.
All right. So how did he get invited to this party where he eventually met Sarah? How did he get invited to this party? Mai invited him. Okay.
Yes.
And what do you think was the motivation for him to go, given, of course, like you've already said, maybe Mai wasn't the greatest renter ever? What do you think? Could there have been some sort of motivation for him to go, maybe to meet some women? Or, I'm not here to talk about his sexuality. Maybe he was into guys. That's fine with me too. But just to get out and be social, or what?
I think it was to get out and be social. He, and of course to meet women. So, he was working pretty hard at school, and he was actually at his apartment that weekend, from what I understand. So he was deep into book work, and she had repeatedly requested that he go, trying to get him to go. It'll be fun. There'll be chicks good there, that kind of stuff. And he finally said, all right, I'm going to go. From what my brother told me, when he went to his apartment after he went missing, James's book was still sitting there open with the pencil in it, he had just put his pencil down and said, okay, and decided to go.
Okay.
Kind of last minute dish.
Okay. But Kristen did not go.
No. Kristen would have been back home in Eau Claire.
Okay.
And so no, she didn't. I don't think there's any love lost between Kristen and Mai, so I don't know if Mai would have even.
We're gonna get into that, certainly. But maybe we just need to explain something a little further here. Where was so the apartment was where, and where was his house? Were they in two different cities?
Right.
Okay,
The
please explain that.
apartment-
Maybe we need to go through that. Please explain that.
Okay. The apartment is in Menomonie, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And the house is in Eau Claire.
Okay.
Kristen's in the house in Eau Claire. James going to school at UW South in Menomonie. So that's where he had his apartment.
Okay. So Kristen and Mai are living together, and he is off at this other place, the apartment.
Right.
Okay.
Kristen and Meyer in the house, and I believe there was another roommate at that time too.
Oh,
I
was
don't
there?
recall his name. But there was another. There's 4 bedrooms in that house.
Wow.
And they were all full, so they had a couple roommates at that time.
Okay. And so the apartment is there, convenient for him to go to school.
Right.
Okay, very good. All right, just want to make clear on that. So where, your understanding, where did they pick this party bus up?
The party bus was Chippewa Falls. So also not that far from Eau Claire, but everybody was meeting, I believe, at the girl's place. I think her name is Stevie. That's whose birthday party it was.
Okay.
And so they were meeting at that apartment, and then from what I understood is that's where the bus came and picked everybody up.
Okay. All right, and when we mean by party bus, this is like one of those converted shuttle buses that you might get in an airport or something, right? To go to like the rental car service, but it's converted, so it has like a bar in it and music and stuff like that. That's what we're talking about, a party bus that can be rented. All right, in contrast to like a limo, which you more sit down in. Whereas a party bus, I guess you could stand up in it and stuff if you wanted.
Right.
All right.
I think Sarah even mentioned to me that there's a pole. There is a pole in the
oh
in the
my.
party bus.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we know what kind of pole we're talking about. Okay. All right, so going to this area, this particular area where, of course, James was last seen. James there often. What do you know? You live there, in the general area. What do you know about this area? Are you familiar with it? Was he familiar with it?
Yeah, James would be familiar with it. It's kind of an area in Eau Claire. It's kind of like the College Street bar kind of hangout. There's multiple bars on that street. It's close to campus. It's well known for the college kids going down there. It's I think pretty much every college town that I know of in Wisconsin has a strip like this. It has multiple bars.
Sure
and
does.
It's kind of,
Surely.
what people do.
Okay, so he had been to this area many times before.
Sure.
As best
Absolutely.
as you can use. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so familiar with the area, familiar where places are, easily knows where he's going, walking around. And
Absolutely.
regarding the party people, all these people essentially were strangers to James except Mai. That's the way you understand it.
That is the way I understand it, yes.
Okay, all right, so we have to keep that in mind. Do we know how many people were there, and do we know the mixture of men and women in this party? Do we know any of that?
I don't remember getting a number on how many were there.
Okay.
I believe it was probably less than 15.
Okay.
There's a mixture of men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really all I know.
That's all you know? If that's all you know, that's all you know. That's totally fine. But there were other guys there. Even though it was a birthday party for a woman, there were other men there.
Right. I think what I was told was the girl that had the party bus for her birthday, her boyfriend invited guys he knew.
Okay. Makes sense.
Don't have a lot of information on that other than that's what I was told.
Okay. All right, so we got this party. James kind of going. The only person he knows is Mai. And, of course, that's maybe even a little dicey given if it's true that she was not the greatest roommate. And then it was in the course of this, though, that he meets this Sarah young woman who we're going to talk about a little bit later. That's how those two meet.
Right.
All right. And they seem to kind of, maybe, as she put it, maybe kind of identify with each other.
Right.
Very quickly. Okay. So November 3rd, 2018, technically is when I guess we want to start this timeline. Do you know, like, the times and everything? When they got the bus, when they got down there to that area, the party area, and do we know where the different places we went? As much as you know about that, Valerie, why don't you talk about that now?
Okay. From what I was told, they got on the bus in Chippewa Falls, and they made a couple of stops in that area. Between Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire, of course, there's multiple places, and they stopped at a few places, including a, I don't know what you want to call it, like an adult store,
Okay.
let's call it.
All right. All right. Yeah, an adult products store.
Right.
Okay.
And so I know they stopped there too. And I don't think that they got down onto Water Street. It was later on, from what I was told. I'm going to say 11-ish or so.
Okay.
And when they got down there, the bus was parked on Water Street, and then there's multiple bars if you pull it up on the map: Shenanigans, the Pioneer, the Pickle, and then a few other ones a little further down.
Okay. Okay, do you understand, was there any, like, set plan? So they're all going to go to the same places. Of course, it's a birthday party, so you think people stay together, but did they all kind of spread out? Did they all stick together? What do we know?
From what I understand, that when they got down there, everybody kind of went separate ways.
Okay.
I know that I think it was Shenanigans. Shenanigans, they were pretty much all together in Shenanigans, from what I was told, and people kind of went other places from there, James and Sarah, I think, were there longer than everybody else, from what I understood.
Okay, so kind of a feeling that maybe after a while they all got spread out, and James and Sarah kind of got separated from the rest of the group.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right, so everybody, and let's move on to this now. What has Sarah told you? Kind of already talked about this a little bit, but we're going to get into this more specifically now, because a lot of this comes from Sarah. So we just have to remember this is just from one person telling the story. We're not saying she's lying or anything. We just have to remember this is just one person's perception of the night. So what has Sarah told you about hanging out with James, his behavior, his attitude, his drinking? What has she told you about that time before eventually he walked off, to go to this other place? What has she said about that?
She told me that he was in good spirits, that the two of them were not partaking in as much in the drinking festivities as everybody else.
Okay.
That the two of them weren't doing all the shots and that sort of thing. That they had a lot in common. They were both talking about their futures and things that they were looking forward to. He had told her about his hobbies, a lot about his life, where he lived, who he lived with. She felt like he was maintaining himself. He wasn't becoming extremely inebriated like some of the other ones that had been on the bus. That he was maintaining his composure, that, you know, he was just seemed like a really nice guy, and that they had talked about, you know, maybe getting together sometime later after this.
Wow.
So,
all right, so there's a little bit of a spark there.
Right, a little bit of a connection.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. So what does she say about James? Those two were getting, these are the questions I have to ask. If those two were getting along so well, why did James then leave, I guess as she said, by herself? And once again, I'm not saying she's lying. It's just that it seems unusual that if the two of them are getting along, why does she say that he then left by himself to walk out in the street and seemingly to go to this other place called the Pickle? Any explanation for that, did she say?
Yes. She said that her car was in Chippewa Falls, where she met the party bus. Her place of residence was in Eau Claire. She also has a little guy. And so that night, instead of riding the party bus all the way back to Chippewa Falls and then driving all the way back to Eau Claire, she decided to just get an Uber and go home from there. All
right. So Sarah had enough of the party bus with the pole in it.
Right.
Okay. All right. I can understand that. And everybody knows me. I'm the like an anti-party guy. I don't do any of that stuff. So this is all very foreign to my existence. All right, so she decides, okay, so she's going to take an Uber. And what does she think James was going to do?
They had talked about it, and he said that he was just going to go down and meet up with the rest of the people. I'm assuming that was at the Pickle, because the Pickle's kind of the last stop on a night of partying. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the hot spot in that area. And most people that are there are, from what I understand, are, you know, well on their way to being thoroughly intoxicated. So a lot of people don't like that bar too. If you read the comments about this bar, or the reviews about the bar, you'll understand what I mean by that.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's like everybody's cup of tea, you know.
Okay.
So that may have been part of the reason why she decided that she wasn't going to go any further.
Gotcha.
As well.
Okay. So she thinks he's going back to the Pickle. And I should ask, is there actually proof that he actually did go back to the Pickle? Meaning a video or something like that?
The proof that I would say is that it was in the press release from Eau Claire PD.
Okay.
In the press release, they say, you know, that he had gone to multiple establishments, that he was seen on, I think there's 2 pictures that we got, showing him walking to that area. And so we know that he at least made it there. There was some communication between him and the bouncers that they recalled. Okay. He was denied entry at that point from what was in the police report. According to the police report, it was that James was too inebriated to enter, so they denied him entry. Which I thought, you know, you have one person that was actually with him telling you, you know, that he wasn't. And then you have, you know, these other people that you don't know or never talked to saying that, you know, he was too drunk to even get in the Pickle, which has to be pretty drunk, I think.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't know. But again, if you read the reviews about the Pickle and about kind of the behavior of the bouncers, or what was known or said about them in the reviews, and you'll kind of understand why I kind of raise an eyebrow to that. So,
let's being that you've mentioned it a couple times, let's just talk about it here for a moment. Are there reviews? I want everybody to know I've not seen these reviews, but I trust what Valerie is saying. Are there reviews in there claiming that maybe the Pickle and the people who manage or are the bouncers for that place? There have been reviews written about it. And I'm not saying it. You're not saying it. This is people online who have been there allegedly say it. That a little bit of racism going on.
Right. There are comments regarding that. There are comments also, stating that they're pretty heavy-handed.
Okay.
When it comes to dealing with people. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he goes there. The claim is that he did not get in there for whatever reason. We're not saying they treated James necessarily in a bad way. We're just saying that maybe sometimes they are rough with people. I don't know if there's any proof that they were rough with James, which is something to think about. All right, so what is then the belief? How far is the walk? If, for example, if James was going to walk home, how, of course, this would have been going where, to his house or his apartment if he could have walked it?
If he could have walked it, he would have been walking home to the house in Eau Claire.
Okay.
A little bit of a walk. I'm trying to think here how many blocks it would actually be.
Just maybe if you just can do driving distance, we can surely decode it from there. If you were driving from the Pickle to his place, how long does it take?
From the Pickle to his place would take about 10 minutes.
Driving in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or less. All right. So not a short walk, but not a terribly long walk either. If we're if we're to believe that he was doing that.
Exactly.
All right. So of course the last place he was seen that we trust was at the Pickle or outside of it, and maybe walking away. When did somebody finally notice that he was missing? That he was supposed to. The belief is that he should have been home in the early morning hours of November 4th. He's not there. Who was the first person who noticed that?
I believe it was
It was.
It was and he stopped answering messages.
Mm-hmm.
Actually with multiple people, but with I guess they had, according to the police report, the press release, that they had called him, said, "Where are you? We're looking for you." Mm-hmm. And James said, "Hey, go ahead and go on with the bus. I'm going to make it home on my own." And
okay.
And so the next day, it was a conversation in this group chat that they had, that Stevie, the girls whose party it was, mm-hmm. said James's car was still at her place. So she saw that his car hadn't been picked up yet. And then there were conversations with Mai saying, I'm going to contact his family. And she did contact my brother. Mm-hmm. And, it kind of went from there.
Okay. So to trace James' movements, he's at his apartment. He drives to Chippewa Falls to get this party bus. The party bus goes to Eau Claire. And so his vehicle is still at the party bus area in Chippewa Falls.
Correct.
All right, and that's how she notices that this woman named Stevie.
Right.
Okay.
Stevie.
All right, and so what does anybody really get bothered by that? Does it get back to his family that day, to Kristen on November 4th, or does it take longer for the news to reach them that, his vehicle's still there and nobody's heard from him? What do you remember about that time?
Well, I know that Mai had contacted Jim. I know there was a conversation with Kristen had contacted her too, talked to Mai. My brother, from what he told me is, Mai had said, nobody can find James. We don't know where he's at. And my brother was like, thinking that James just wasn't answering because my kind of drove him crazy.
Right. Yeah,
with how many texts and calls that she gave to him. So, but then the family started trying to call James, and James not answering his dad's calls or his sister's calls was unusual. And I believe that's when my brother drove back. My brother was driving truck up in South Dakota, and he drove back then. And then they kind of they went and got James's car and brought it back, and then they were contacting people and talking to people, and come Monday, then I guess the formal initial report.
My did.
Yeah.
Wow.
From what I understand, my is the one. I guess in my family's head too, it was kind of maybe James did meet up with somebody.
Yeah.
He's a young guy, so.
Sure.
They weren't trying to get too crazy, paranoid, worried about it initially, until this went on for a couple of days.
Okay. And so what date would you say it was? Would you say it was November 5th, November 6th, before all this started getting rolling?
The initial missing persons was on the 6th.
Okay.
I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Then in our family, kind of a group chat, is where my brother said, that James is missing. We don't know where he's at, and kind of gave the family the details about it. Okay. And kind of what the police were up to pertaining to that. I know that they were talking to people. I know that, they were worried about the river being right there, and that the river was at flood stage, and so nobody could really, they didn't want anybody going and looking at that time kind of in that area because it was too dangerous because of the water levels there on the Chippewa River.
Sure. Could it be established, once again in those first days, November 5th, November 6th, that James never did make it back to this house in Eau Claire? That could be established, not just maybe because people didn't see him, but there was nothing of his there that he would have had the night that he was out on the town.
Right. No, nothing to indicate that he was ever back there.
Okay. So I have it in my notes, though. In your opinion, the family's opinion, at least initially, maybe even to this day, not much of a response from the police. What would you say?
I would say not really much of a response from the police. College towns, college guys, kind of thing. I don't think that there was, initially like gun-ho, we gotta get down here and we gotta look for this kid kind of thing. The first official search wasn't until Thursday when they had out search and rescue and those types of boats down in that area. And then it was still not a lot of, they weren't asking people to help. They weren't asking anybody to come down there. The river was still up to some degree.
But the river was eventually, within maybe the first week, was the river searched?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would James have had to, if he was walking home, if we're to think maybe that's a possibility, would he have had to have gone over the bridge to get?
Yes. In the Water Street area, there's two walkover bridges. There's one further downriver and then one further upriver. The one further upriver would make more sense to me for him to cross there, because that goes right up the hill and then not too far from his home. And that bridge is like connected to the college campuses. from one side of the river to the other. Okay. So you would walk right up the river walkway onto that bridge, up the hill, and then he's 5 or 6 blocks, I think, from home.
Okay. All right, so we did these searches. Of course, nothing was found. No signs of internet, nothing, not necessarily, of course, not James, but nothing of any possessions or anything connected to him.
No.
Okay.
From what I understand, his phone was never found. It pinged in an area.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that, Valerie. We'll get to that. But just nothing found. Just nothing found. Any of his possessions, keys, credit cards, wallet, phone.
No.
So in these searches, not only was he not found, none of his stuff was found, or a hat, or a shirt, anything.
Nothing.
Okay. Did the police question? Of course, as much as we've talked about mine, maybe. Not being a great runner, I give her all the credit in the world for taking responsibility for doing the report. I guess she and Sarah were questioned. What about anybody else who could be considered part of the group that night? Were they questioned by police?
There were, as from what I understand in my conversations with Sarah, there were other people that were interviewed about that night. There were people that were on that bus that were not interviewed as well. Mm-hmm. There were people, from what I was told, that had warrants for their arrest and didn't want anything to do with talking to the police, so their names were never brought up. I don't know even to this day if they were ever identified or spoke to by Eau Claire PD.
All right. How did you learn about these? I have to ask, how did you learn about some of these other people who were part of this party bus that night who had maybe had some surly reputations? How did you learn about that?
Through Sarah.
All right, because she knew some of them?
Right. She knew some of them.
Okay.
And that particular night, also, there were a few of these gentlemen that got on the bus that nobody really knew except this girl's boyfriend. And so Sarah said that, she didn't feel comfortable around him for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there was also some indication that they were using or supplying some of the drugs that may have been used that night by some of the people on the bus.
All right, so we have to consider then that you have the birthday woman, Stevie. She has a man in her life, and the man of her life invites some of his friends.
Right.
Okay, and so we're getting... All right, and who knows who these people might have been. All right, so in your opinion, though, maybe some of these people, as best as you can tell, once again, 5.5 years into this disappearance, that maybe some of these people avoided talking to police because of what they know about themselves.
Right.
Okay. But as far as you can tell, though, who knew, of course, knew James before this party, and Sarah... have spoken to police. They haven't avoided anything.
Right.
Okay, but we're gonna come back to mine. Some weird things that popped up very quickly though after this. All right, so we have this situation. Unfortunately, very common situation, at least we seem to have in the United States. People going out in groups, and then one person, usually a guy, gets separated from that group in a party atmosphere, might have been drinking, maybe trying to walk somewhere, and the guy goes missing.
Right.
All right, but of course, every one of those is a little bit different, and so that's why we have to get into these particulars as much as we do, at least here at Unfound, really maybe understand the person and the people around that person that night. Let's move on to this. This is the rest of the investigation. James on video. My understanding there was some video, but I don't know if the video has been released, but some pictures. What can you say about the pictures that have been released? What are they?
The pictures that I obtained were pictures of James crossing the street in the Water Street area. You can see he doesn't have a jacket on. He's only wearing a T-shirt.
Okay.
And you can see that he's holding his hands kind of weird. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure. But it just seems like he's kind of, if you look at the pictures, it's kind of like maybe a frustration is kind of what it looks like to me. I'm not sure. But he doesn't have his phone in his hand. That's the other thing.
Okay.
So, those are the things that I noticed the most, is that he, his posture.
But it's not a video. It's just what we call a freeze frame of a video.
Right.
Just one frame of a video that was taken. You've never seen the actual video of him actually walking.
No, never seen the video of him walking. There are multiple cameras down in that area.
Okay.
And
I'm sure.
Okay. I know.
So is there only one picture, or are there a couple pictures that from different locations that you've seen, Valerie?
There are two pictures, two still pictures from the same location, walking across the same street. And those were just given to identify what James was wearing that night. So those pictures were shown to Mai and said, "Is this what James was wearing that night?" And confirmed that.
Okay. We'll come back to that as well. You're, as best as you can tell, these videos that were the freeze frames, before or after he was at the Pickle, as best as you can tell. Before. Okay.
Right.
So
he's crossing the street between the Pioneer bar and the Pickle bar.
Okay.
That's Fourth Avenue, and that's where he's at in those two pictures.
All right, very good. However, the Pickle, your understanding about any video, of course, I'm sure they have video. What have you heard about any video from that particular establishment?
I spoke with the owner of the Pickle.
You did? Wow. Great.
I did. I spoke with him, and I asked him if I could view. I didn't need the video, but if I could just look at it. And he said that it was all obtained by Eau Claire PD. So it was all... I asked also at the Pioneer, was it the Pioneer? No, or Shenanigans, and also told that, everything was submitted to Eau Claire PD, and there was, they didn't have any copies or anything. So.
All right, so they say. That doesn't mean we did. Right. So they say. I'm not sure if that's the truth or not, but that's what they told you.
That is what they told me.
Okay. Because the reason I say that, this might be believable back in maybe like 1999 when everything was being done with VHS still. But all security systems these days go right to hard drives. And of course we know how easy it is to copy a video. And to take that video, they would have had to have taken the hard drive with it. And we know the police didn't do that.
Oh, gotcha.
You know what I mean? We all know how easy it is to send videos to people. We're doing that all the time. Of course, for the purposes of doing this podcast, I meant me making videos that we put on the YouTube channel. I could copy that 1,000,000 times as much as my hard drive would... take, and if the police need a video, you just give me an email address. I'll email the video to you. You don't have to physically, copy it onto nobody does that anymore. So they say, well, we gave it all to police. Well, no, probably they didn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's just not the technology.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I always thought that they were kind of, or I was told, or however I came to believe it, that they were like recorded on a loop, and then if you didn't catch the video soon enough, then that loop was recorded over.
Well, that could be, that might be, but still, it's all being converted into what we call an MP4 file, which can be, which can be copied.
Gotcha.
It just, there is no, it's not like a set of VHS tape where it's like there's something physical there that people have to take. It's just, binary code is just a bunch of zeros and ones being saved, magnetized on your computer that can be copied anytime. So that they said they gave it to the computer or to the police, the only way they would not still have it in their possession is if they gave a copy of it to the police and then deleted it off their own hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that. I just... I'm suspicious of that.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so everybody knows that. Let's move on to this. You've mentioned his phone a couple times. This is maybe one of those... I don't know if we have a good answer for this, but... my understanding is that if we are to believe that James was walking home, he would have been walking in generally an east direction, but his phone pinged the last time in a west direction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's in the police report that, it pinged, where it pinged. I can't remember the exact. It was on Menomonie Street. The Water Street turns into Menomonie Street, and it was further down to the west that the phone pinged.
Okay.
And I believe I mentioned to you that they also had an incoming call or text to the phone on Sunday night,
okay,
8 o'clock or sometime. So, and again, that was mentioned in a police report. There's never been any indication whether or not that phone was actually located or anything along those lines.
Okay, but his phone, once again, is still missing 5.5 years later, just like he is.
Right.
Okay. Other than him turning around, maybe going the opposite direction, or just, I don't know if it's, maybe he had different ideas of where he wanted to go. Other than that, is anybody in a position to be an expert on the topic given you reasoning why, if he walked in a easterly direction, that would have pinged on a tower to the west? Anybody give you any opinion on that?
I spoke with the detectives at Eau Claire PD, and the way that it was explained to me, they thought maybe that instead of going easterly and heading home, like I mentioned, there's a big hill, that if James would have went westerly, crossed over that lower walkway bridge, and then up, he would be right in where there's fast food joints, Taco Bell, McDonald's, that kind of area. So they thought, well, maybe he would have, that was their reasoning to me. He walked down the opposite way because he wanted to get something to eat at one of these fast food places down there. None of it made sense to me because he could have called Kristen, who's less than 10 minutes away, and she could have been there, picked him up, and took him to McDonald's. So it doesn't really make sense to me.
Okay. Sometimes these things don't make sense, but as best as you can tell, your opinion is that he would have, if he was planning to walk home, he would have gone in the east direction, but they discovered his phone pinged well to the west.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Now, I want to note to the audience before we talk about this is that I've seen that I've heard about this conversation. Valerie and I have talked about it, but I don't, people say lots of things, but there's a woman who claims that she was actually having a conversation on an app called Whisper on the night that James went missing, and she has come forward. The tough part is that everything she says, I don't know if it's verifiable or not. So, Valerie, why don't you talk about this person? When did she come forward? What has she said? And really, has she said anything about James, like, that would show that she knew him more than just reading what can be read about his disappearance? I guess you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Did she have any personalized information on James that you wouldn't normally get in the public sphere? Let's talk about that.
Okay. So she contacted the Bring James homepage and it was quite a while after he went missing. The way she told it to me was that they were communicating on this Whisper app, which is anonymous.
Okay.
And so she only knew, his name was James, that he was going to school at Stout, that he lived in Eau Claire. So she didn't really know his last name or anything. So I believe what she said was that she didn't really understand that it was James that she was talking to until she put two and two together herself, in hearing about his disappearance. She didn't provide me with really anything that would really say, oh yeah, she was talking to James for sure. But she, what she told me was that he was in good spirits, like Sarah had mentioned, that they were making plans to maybe meet up for coffee or something at a later date, that he seemed like a really nice guy. And that it struck her really strangely that they were having this conversation and then immediately it just drops off. And she doesn't, they don't connect again. There's no response to her again. It just goes completely cold after that. So
she was in, they never met each other in person, but this is an app where you really don't know the other person's name unless the person reveals it, right?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Did she live in the Eau Claire area?
I believe she lives in Eau Claire, yeah.
Eau Claire, okay. All right, so there's that.
Right.
How did she put two and two together then? That being that maybe she didn't know his name, how did she put two and two together? Did she explain that?
Well, the way that she explained it to me was, more information, or there was information that she came across about James, whether it was James's page or maybe I can't recall. It could have been after I did the Discovery ID show too, about James. But then she started to put, his name was James, that kind of. That kind of thing, and like you said, none of this has been verified for me, but in my conversation with her, I did ask her if if she comes across anything else that she remembers or anything, or if she could get a hold of that conversation, to contact the page back again, and I only heard from her, I believe, that one time.
Okay. Not sure what to make. Did she say that the two of them just met on this app that day, or is this something that had been going on for a week, or what?
Well, I'm not familiar with this app, so I'm really not too sure how it kind of goes. But she said she had made a post, I don't know, a couple days prior on this app that she felt like she didn't have nobody or something along those lines.
Okay.
And so James responded to that message, and then it was a couple days later then again where I don't know who contacted who or how that went, but that their conversation started up again the night that he was out on the party bus.
Okay. Listeners can decide what they want to do with that piece of information. And we have to remember, at least one of those pictures, James did not have the phone in his hand, so it was not like doesn't seem like he was talking to anybody, but this woman said that she thought she might have been talking to him that night.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Let's move on to this. Just want to reiterate something. Of course, Sarah is the source for a lot of what went on that evening, that night. She said that when she last saw James, in her opinion, James was not drunk.
Right.
Okay.
Right. She said, in her opinion, he was handling himself just fine. He wasn't slurring his words. She didn't have any reason to believe that he was, overly intoxicated, and that when they separated, she fully felt like, he could take care of himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Okay. Moving on. Let's talk a little bit about Mai. First of all, her description of what James was wearing that night, does it match up with what he was actually wearing?
There's been some, it's been a little confusing. Initial reports, there was something like he was wearing a white jacket with black and plaid or something along those lines. We've never seen that jacket. Nobody really knew what he was wearing that night except the people that was with him, so there wasn't any selfies taken or anything along those lines. The only thing we really know what he was wearing is from those pictures, those still pictures that we saw.
Okay.
I know that she told Kristen that she had his jacket, and but she never gave it back. So we don't know what happened to the jacket, what the jacket looked like, anything along those lines. So the jacket's still a mystery.
Okay. Has Mai ever offered up any theory as to what could have happened? She obviously filed this report, give her all the credit for that, but to your knowledge, has she ever offered up her own idea as to what happened? And the reason we're concentrating on her, because she's the only person in that group who knew James before that party started that night.
Absolutely.
So that's why we're concentrating her, not picking on her, but she had known James for quite a while. She was there that night. In fact, she invited him to go. So has she ever offered up a theory as to what happened to him?
No, she hasn't. She's been, I'm going to say, really cold about it. She said, she had her conversations with the police department, and if we wanted any of those, any questions answered, we would have to speak to them. So she didn't give, she didn't give Kristen asked multiple people asked her. Of course we're going to ask her. She's the last one that was with her. And I don't know if it was too many people were asking her the same questions and she just shut down, or if there's other more nefarious reasons why she just decided to go cold to us. But nobody ever had a real conversation with her on that night, other than Eau Claire PD, which is sad.
Okay. Now here's the odd part. Did Mai ever live in that house again?
No. That also is, interesting, like you said. She never went back to the house that she lived in with James. She left her belongings there for months, actually. And as far as anyone, she never went back there and stayed the night or anything along those lines. She had to be repeatedly prompted to come pick up the rest of her belongings that were there, the belongings that had belonged there. But no, she never came back, and as far as anybody knows, and went to her room that was there at James's house. So
she just left so once again, she left all her possessions there.
Yeah.
Whatever was there.
She did. And it was actually not until I think April that she came and got those items, because I went up to Kristen and James's and stayed in that room. And so when I got up there, Kristen had already had her stuff packed up, and I started calling her number and saying, hey, you need to come get your stuff, and sending her texts. You need to either come get your stuff, or we're not going to store it. It needs to either you come get it, or we're going to put it out at the curb. So and she finally came and got it.
So 6 months later is when she finally got all her stuff.
Yeah.
All right. That is a little surprising. That's certainly something that is certainly a quirk of this disappearance. Especially when it seems like, I know I haven't heard anything that was saying that she was planning on moving out. I think it's believed that Is it your opinion that if James doesn't go missing, is it your opinion that Mai would have continued to live in that house with Kristen?
I think that there were the problems, from what I understood, were ramping up there, because, like I said, she was, from what I understood, either not paying or paying very late, and James had even reduced the rent for her there. So she was getting a pretty good deal in a college town for, to have in a room. And so, why she abruptly not coming back and why she didn't get her stuff is a mystery to me as well. I don't understand it.
Okay. Now let's move on to this. And in fact, I'm not saying Mai had anything to do with this, but this was one of the other unusual fallouts from his disappearance. That was at the house or his apartment in which things, we don't want to say anybody necessarily broke in, but things were taken. Why don't you explain that?
This was in the house. Like I said, James they had several roommates in and out of the house. James had coded entry locks on all of the entrances in the garage in the house. Were all coded entry. Sometime after he went missing, some of his belongings came up missing from his room. Again, his room was downstairs, and the same downstairs where Mai's room was. I think it took a little bit of time before I think my brother and maybe his wife went down there into James's room, and then they started discovering that there were things that were missing of James, mostly valuables, of course. Some jewelry and a handgun that my brother had just got.
Wow.
James.
A gun.
Yeah.
You believe the gun wasn't a break-in, but it seems that these items, including a gun, were stolen.
Exactly. There was a police report filled out about it. I don't know if anything ever became of that, but yeah, there were definitely, that's concerning.
Okay. All right. So, and what you're saying is this theft of these things still unsolved. That these things that were taken, never found in anybody else's possession.
Right. Never found in anyone's possession, and I made the rounds up in that area to the pawn shops and whatnot, kind of keeping an eye out for them. But from what I was told, there's listings that go between the police department and pawn shops, and so nothing ever popped up of his stuff showing up in any of those kind of places. So, still missing to this day.
All right, and I just have to ask: are we sure? I don't know what the gun law is necessarily off the top of my head or in Wisconsin. Are we sure that he did not have his gun with him that night?
I'm pretty sure. I would have to say that none of our family would think that he would take his handgun out with him going out to party.
Okay.
That's not something that that you would do. So no.
Okay.
I don't believe that he had his gun on him.
Okay. What about this area's reputation? Maybe we're not surprised that drunk going around, a bunch of young drunk people in this area of town. So it does have a reputation, though, for physical altercations.
It does.
In fact, you told me about not your personal experience, but you knew of somebody who had something happened or something like that.
Right. There was a friend of my daughter's. The guy had gone out down on Water Street and separated from his group and got jumped. And they found him pretty badly beat up in an alleyway right off of Water Street. That was never put in the paper or on the news or anything like that. It's just something, that the only way I knew about that was because, like I said, it was somebody that is friends with my daughter. So that area, I think, Eau Claire comes off as a really safe city. They like to market themselves that way. But there are a lot of issues at the core of that town. There are gangs there. It is a corridor between Minneapolis and Chicago. So there is human trafficking. There are drugs. There are gangs. There's kind of all of that bigger city issue in Eau Claire, just not really talked about all that much. But things do happen. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Should also ask you that night, any witnesses ever come forward saying that they saw somebody matching James' description walking anywhere, anything like that? Anything that would be believable?
No. I have had people, contact the page and kind of say, kind of different stuff. Some of it's not very good. I don't really want to get into it, but
okay.
Say maybe saw something and I need to go check out this area or something along those lines. Nothing ever really panned out, and having a page like that, there are so many really good people that I can't say enough about that really go try their very best to help you when you're searching for a loved one. So many great people, but there are also kind of people that maybe don't have the best intentions for you at all, or maybe are selfishly, we've had them try to get money from us before on the page and whatnot.
Sure.
So there's,
I'm sure.
So that's just, but yeah, nothing that I never got any kind of a tip or anything that really made me bite onto it and say, no, I finally got something to help me look for James, and I feel like this, we don't know any more on this day as we did, initially on his disappearance. There's not any updates. There's nothing, sightings or, his bank cards or his accounts or anything along those lines that have ever happened since that night.
Okay. What has this been like for you over the past 5.5 years now, Valerie? Of course, I'm talking to you, and you've talked about having the paperwork and all this. This is not something, I guess, that you maybe could have ever predicted that you would be involved in your life. And so how's this affected you?
In so many different ways. I decided, that I could help my brother as best I could and try to find out what we weren't getting any answers about, I guess. And so when I moved up to Eau Claire, I was really focused on that, on, trying to find out anything I possibly could about that night. And so it's affected me, there's just so much you don't know about the world until you get kind of cast into it. In a situation like this, I had no idea the amount of missing people in this country.
Yeah.
It's staggering. And you don't really, you kind of go home at night and you don't really think about the things that are really going on in your area. And so I met a lot of people that also went through similar situations as us in Eau Claire, with their loved ones that had gotten lost, went missing, and then, eventually found in the river, like the next spring. And so having to kind of navigate all of these new experiencing other people's trauma, I guess, is a lot of it, how it affects me. You don't really see all of this, and so it's a very eye-opening experience, and it can be really, really overwhelming. But it can be really beautiful, too. I've met some really beautiful people because of this, so it's taxing sometimes. You know, you need to take a break. I don't know how you do it, Edward. And speaking with the families, all of these families, you know, it's really disheartening, and you really start to wonder about our society. And you think in this day and age too, right, that you know, you can't really do anything and get away with it when not people know about it. You know, so how does somebody in a city with cameras and people and police, how does somebody just disappear? You know, it's just mind-boggling. But yeah.
I should ask you this very specifically. To your knowledge, did James ever make that walk before? Let's just say he was heading to his house. Had he ever walked that before, that specific route, what it would have been from the area of the Pickle to his house? Had he ever made that walk before?
Not that I know of, and I highly doubt that.
Okay.
Mostly because, like I said, his sister is pretty much a homebody, and instead of walking, he would call his sister, and he never called his sister that night. And so that, to me, you know, again, makes me believe that something happened pretty quickly.
Okay. Do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for James's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell the listeners about it right now?
I do. I did create a page called Bring James Liedtka Home. I initially started that page focusing on James. The farther I got into learning about what America is experiencing as far as missing people, I started adding other people in Wisconsin, and then there's really no story that you can turn down. You know, you want to help everybody just like you want to be helped. And so that was my intention with the page, is hopefully somebody would come forward and let us know even the simplest things to kind of help me understand this timeline, how he went missing, and what happened to him. The page has been going pretty fine. Like I have, you know, we help other people help us. So it's search and rescue groups to contact the page. So it's been really helpful. I am taking a break from it right now. Like I just had mentioned, you know, it can be really taxing.
Yeah, it can.
So I'm just taking a step back, and my brother has the keys to the page at this time. So, but yeah, I opened that page, and a lot of people have really helped us and inspired us and taught us. It's been such a huge learning experience, but you don't really understand how deep that gets into you. You know, so I hope that makes sense.
It does. Why don't you say the name of the Facebook page again, please?
Bring James Liedtka Home.
And that is Liedtka. James Liedtka.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
That was hard.
Yeah, I before E except after C, and because I know his name can be maybe difficult for some people to spell, including myself. I'm glad that I got it right there. Any final words before we complete this interview, Valerie?
I want to thank you, of course, and I want to thank all
Very
of the
welcome.
people that support our page. I also want to plead with anybody. If you know anything, even if you think it's nothing. It could help a family, our family, somebody else's family. So share those missing people's flyers. They are real people. And, help anybody's family that you can in any way that you can. We really appreciate it.
Valerie, thank you for appearing on this episode of Unfound.
Welcome, Edward. Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
And that was my May 17th, 2024 interview with Valerie Tully, aunt of James Liedtka. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. And one more time, I produced a map video for James's disappearance that can now be found on Unfound's YouTube channel. There are no easy questions, there are no easy answers for a disappearance like James's. And there are many like his. Valerie and I, although it's not in the interview, talked about a young man who went into the water in Eau Claire and was eventually found 30 miles downriver, deceased. Very sad. But the story shows how daunting a task a search of a major river can be. The problem? There's no guarantee James went into the river, even though we know of disappearances that were solved with that outcome. Many. All I will say for sure is if James went into the river, the perpetrator was not someone riding around looking to throw some young man into the river. Likewise, if James is on land, alive or deceased, figuring out how to resolve this disappearance doesn't get any easier. Like we learned with Beau Man, sometimes deceased people can be hiding in plain sight only a quarter-mile away. Or with Jason Landry, who is still missing, we've learned that a sparse landscape does not guarantee a quick end to a disappearance. Or with Brandon Roberts, who was missing for 2 years, then found alive, we've learned that we can never rule out the improbable. But how can we make it happen if it can happen? I'm not sure. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge to all of you that the odds say that yes, some of these disappearances like James's, and maybe even James's itself, are foul play. There, I said it. But the evidence, the history of these types of cases, overwhelmingly says that they are mostly not foul play. Yet, my observation is we, at least here in the United States, are comfortable with the numbers, whatever they are regarding these types of cases. In fact, I think the reason hoaxes and conspiracies have so easily risen from circumstances like James's is the public's desire to run from the fact that it's our culture that is causing these disappearances. Easier to blame these cases on invisible killers and cartoons spray painted on concrete. What are the real causes? In no particular order and in no particular combination: alcohol problems, drug problems, self-destruction problems, loneliness problems, lack of moderation in everything problems, too many businesses needing people to drink to excess to stay in business problems, maturity problems, us not looking out for each other problems. Because of this, though, this is one of the easiest kind of disappearances to stop. How? First step. There's one overriding fact to all of these cases. The missing people were alone. Friends do not let friends be alone on party nights. Not going to the bathroom, not walking home, not walking down to the corner store. Use the buddy system, just like scuba diving. Because I continue to be convinced that Brian Schaefer, Jesse Ross, and whoever else None of these guys go missing if they had been with others when leaving their locations. This was most stark in the disappearance and death of Riley Strain, who got kicked out of a bar, and not one of his frat brothers took the hit with him, so he wouldn't be alone out on the streets of Nashville. It's something simple, but I'm sure it would greatly cut down on these types of disappearances. Until then, though, none of us will have smiling faces. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of James Liedtka, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, sign up, and partake in the Unfound blog. For now, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.